All right, folks, let's take a look at section 2. Here is the focus question. By the end of World War II, some 50 million men had registered for the draft and 10 million had been inducted into the military. Military service united Americans from every walk of life, bringing the children of immigrants into contact with other Americans from a variety of racial and geographical backgrounds. Further, the draft ensured that the burden of military engagement was widely shared throughout American society. Within the United States, the war transformed the role of the federal government. Roosevelt established new wartime agencies such as the War Production Board, War Manpower Commission, and Office of Price Administration to control labor distribution, shipping, set manufacturing quotas, and fix wages, prices, and rents. The number of federal workers rose from 1 million to 4 million, and unemployment, at a rate of 14% in 1940, virtually disappeared by 1943. The government built housing for war workers and forced civilian companies to produce material for the war effort. Auto plants now made trucks, tanks, and jeeps for the Army. The gross national product more than doubled to $214 billion during the war, and federal wartime spending equaled twice the amount spent in all the previous 150 years. The government sold millions of dollars in war bonds, hiked taxes, and started taking income tax from Americans' paychecks. Ties between government and the federal government, between corporations and the federal government grew much closer during World War II, with business executives taking key positions in federal agencies supervising war industries. Roosevelt gave incentives to increase production. Most federal spending went to the largest companies, which sped up a long-term trend toward economic concentration. And by the war's end, the 200 biggest industrial firms represented nearly half of all corporate assets in the nation. Wartime production was gargantuan in scale and shocking in its intensity, not only making military equipment by the millions, but leading to inventions such as radar, jet engines, and early computers. The war helped restore the reputation of big business that the Depression had tarnished. Federal funds restored old manufacturing areas and fostered new ones on the West Coast, in places like Southern California, home to steel and aircraft production, and in the South, where outmigration and military-related factories and shipyards shifted employment from agriculture to industry. This raised incomes in the South, but it did not end its deep poverty, sparse urbanization, or undeveloped economy, which still depended on agriculture, extractive industries like mining, lumber, and oil, and manufacturing linked to agriculture, such as cotton textiles. Organized labor saw the war as a struggle for freedom that would expand economic and political democracy at home and secure its influence in politics and industry. During the war, unions were part of a three-sided arrangement with government and business that allowed union membership to rise to unprecedented numbers. To win industrial peace and stabilize war production, the federal government forced resistance employers to recognize the unions. In turn, union leaders promised not to strike and recognized employers' rights to managerial prerogatives and fair profits. By the war's end, unions were entrenched in many economic sectors, and nearly 15 million workers, a third of the non-farm labor workforce, were union members, which was the highest proportion in U.S. history. But labor was a less powerful partner in the war than business or government. The New Deal's decline continued during the war, and Congress became thoroughly dominated by a conservative alliance between Republicans and Southern Democrats, who retained Social Security but ended programs allegedly controlled by leftists, such as the Civilian Conservation Corps and Works Progress Administration. Many workers protested the demanding wartime conditions and the freeze on wages, which had been imposed by the government, even while corporate profits soared. Despite the no-strike pledge, 1943 and 1944 saw multiple brief walkouts. World War II came to be remembered as the Good War, in which the nation united behind noble aims. But all wars need the mobilization of public opinion, and freedom was a prominent theme in efforts to sell the war. Roosevelt believed the four freedoms represented essential American values that could be universalized across the globe. Freedom from fear meant a desire not only for peace, but for long-term security in a chaotic world. The importance of freedom of speech and religion seemed self-evident, but their prominence emphasized the new significance of First Amendment protections of free expression. During the war, the Supreme Court's judges, contrasting American constitutional liberty with Nazi tyranny, upheld the rights of religious minorities to refuse to salute the American flag in public schools, as opposed to the coercive patriotism of World War I. Freedom from want seemed the most ambiguous of the four freedoms. Though FDR first used it to refer to eliminating barriers to trade, he soon linked this freedom to guaranteeing a standard of living for American workers and farmers by preventing a return of the Depression. FDR argued that this would bring real freedom for the common man. When Rockwell's paintings first appeared in the Saturday Evening Post, each was accompanied by an essay. The Filipino poet and American immigrant Carlos Bulosan wrote of those Americans still outside the social mainstream and how to them freedom from want included having enough to eat, sending their children to school, and being able to participate fully in American life. Founded in 1942, the Office of War Information was created to mobilize public opinion. Political divisions created by the New Deal affected efforts to promote the four freedoms, with liberal Democrats dominating the writing staff and depicting the conflict as a people's war for freedom. The OWI was concerned that most Americans supported the war efforts out of a desire for revenge against the Japanese. To convince the Americans public that the war was being fought for the four freedoms, the OWI utilized radio, film, the press, and other media to give the conflict an ideological meaning while avoiding the nationalist hysteria of World War I. The OWI utilized deep-seated American traditions, including notions of bringing freedom to the world and the United States as a great emancipator. Critics of the OWI claimed that the freedom being promoted was Roosevelt's version of the 1930s. Congress eliminated most of its funding when over concern that the OWI was promoting New Deal social programs just as much as the war effort. After the OWI was defunded, the selling of America became a private affair. Private companies joined in efforts to promote wartime patriotism under the guidance of War Advertising Council. Alongside advertisements urging Americans to purchase war bonds, guard against revealing military secrets, and grow victory gardens, there was also an emphasis on marketing advertisers' definition of freedom. They insisted that Roosevelt had overlooked a fifth freedom, freedom of choice through free enterprise. Americans on the home front enjoyed a prosperity many could scarcely remember, despite the rationing of scarce consumer items. Marketers stressed that the possibilities for consumer goods were endless if they could remain free from government controls. War mobilization sparked an unprecedented growth in women's employment to fill industrial jobs left by men. Government and private ads celebrated the independent woman worker with images like Rosie the Riveter, the female industrial laborer painted by Norman Rockwell, as a muscle-bound and self-reliant woman. With 15 million men in the military, in 1944, women made up one-third of the civilian workforce, and 350,000 women served in auxiliary military units. Women filled industrial, professional, and government jobs that were previously barred to them, such as aircraft manufacturing and shipbuilding, and they forced some unions, like the United Auto Workers, to confront issues like equal pay for equal work, maternity leave, and child care. Many women who had a taste of freedom working men's jobs for male wages hoped to remain in the workforce after the war. Yet government, employers, and unions saw women's work as only a temporary wartime necessity. Though ads told women working in factories that they were fighting for freedom, their language promoted victory, not women's rights or independence. After the war, most women war workers, especially those in high-paying industrial positions, lost their jobs to men. Indeed, war ads informed Americans that their work would help secure the American way of life after the war. Traditional families with the women at home and men at work enjoying household appliances and consumer goods. So that's the end of Section 2. We'll be back for Section 3.